Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I'm going to be reviewing Old School Essentials Advanced Edition. Let's roll it. Now, my first encounter with Dungeons & Dragons was with the Moldvay and Cook Basic and Expert sets from the early 80s, and that really launched me into a wonderful time collecting and trying to play Dungeons & Dragons, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Gamma World, Top Secret, Marvel Superheroes, and TMNT. So I have a very fond place in my heart for Moldvay Cook Basic and Expert. So when I first encountered Old School Essentials, which purports to be a 100% compatible and faithful representation of Moldvay Cook Basic and Expert, I was intrigued. But it had one minor downside. The thing that really turned me off about Basic and Expert D&D, even though I loved the system overall, was that inclusion of race class. That is, if you played a dwarf, you were a dwarf, and that was it. If you played an elf, you were an elf, and that was it, or a halfling, and that was it. The other classes, like cleric and thief and fighter and magic user, they were all limited to people who played humans. And there was a reason for this. The other races had specific abilities that really made them much more capable, especially at lower levels. And so to balance the game and to make it so that humans would probably be the majority of people in each party, the limitations were placed on the other races. Advanced D&D came along and decided to break things up. It split both race and class, although there were limitations on the different races on what classes they could be, and what attribute scores you had to have in order to select a race to play. Well, Old School Essentials, in their Advanced Edition, has taken on that Advanced D&D feel and included a lot of optional rules that would allow players and game masters to run a table that took the best of Basic and Expert, the free-flowing gameplay, the rules-light mechanics, the very ordered and structured combat, and of course the incredible hex crawl rules from Cook's version of Expert D&D. These are all included in the original Old School Essentials, but now they decided they were going to add in things like splitting race class and adding optional rules for things like weapon proficiency and specialization. Things that are known from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but really never appeared in Basic, unless you were homebrewing, that is. But the cool thing about Old School Essentials Advanced Edition is that they've taken this advanced feel and still held on to a 100% compatible BX version of the game. So, for instance, your ability score modifiers begin at the score of 13 instead of the more stringent 15 from Advanced Edition. That's pretty cool. Weapon proficiencies and specialization, as well as things like weapon speed, are heavily simplified to fit in a BX-style game. But the questions some folks ask sometimes is, why should I bother shelling out money for Old School Essentials, which is $40 for the print books and then $15 for the PDFs in general, when I can go to DriveThruRPG and download Basic and Expert sets for $4.99 each as a PDF? The answer to that question is twofold. First, you have the quality of the print. If you're able to get a hold of an original copy of Moldvay Cook Basic and Expert, you're probably going to have a rather beat-up book because the original printings were just folded and saddle stitched. They weren't designed to, have longevity, although there's a lot of people out there who are still using their original books. The Old School Essential printings, on the other hand, are high quality. These are stitched binding. They will fold open flat. They're going to last for a very long time. So once you get it, you've got it. The cool thing is if you buy the print products from the publisher, you also get the PDF for free, which is going to be really neat when the print products are available. Unfortunately, right now for the Advanced Edition, they're still fulfilling their Kickstarter backers, and so you can't buy the print copy at the moment. You can, however, get the PDFs off of DriveThruRPG for $15 a piece, and this is how I acquired the game. The second point of the response to that question, why should I bother with this game, is in the presentation, and this is really compelling. Take a look, for example, at the cleric class, the way that it's presented in Cook's version of Expert. And I'm choosing Expert here because this has all the levels that Old School Essentials also has. It's an okay layout, and it has most of the information that you're going to need to roll up a cleric right there on the page. But as you look at it, you can see that, well, the cleric doesn't have this page to themselves. They also have dwarves and elves that are here as well. And so everything feels more condensed. The other thing you'll notice right off the bat is that there's no description for the cleric to be found anywhere on this page. To find that, you actually have to flip ahead 2 pages, and that's finally where you'll find the write-up for the cleric inside the Expert book. And even then, the cleric doesn't have a page to itself. It is surrounded by the other classes that are right near it alphabetically. Compare that then to the way the classes are presented in Old School Essentials. Everything is laid out in a beautiful 2-page spread. There is a description, there is everything that you need to roll up the character, but also it includes things like saving throws, all in a very easily read chart. So not only did Old School Essentials lay out the classes better than Moldvay or Cook did way back in the early 80s, they actually added more information to make these spreads more valuable. Is it valuable enough to shell out the money for these books? Probably. The other cool thing about these books, both the referee's tome and the player's tome, which is really what I'm concentrating on here, is that they're beautiful. There is an incredible amount of original line art that's included on the interior pages, as well as some 1- and 2-page full color spreads that are just a joy to look at. So when you're flipping through pages and you're looking for information, you really are tempted to just keep flipping pages to see what might be on the next one and really take in what they've added there. That's a really good feature, and it shows that a lot of care has gone into creating Old School Essentials. The other really big thing about Old School Essentials that people can't quite get to sometimes is that, in a sense, Old School Essentials has transcended its original desire to be a 100% faithful representation of Moldvay, Cook, Basic, and Expert. In Moldvay Cook, you had the 4 basic classes of Fighter, Thief, Cleric, and Magic User, as well as the demi-human classes of Elf and Halfling and Dwarf. So you had 7 total. You open up Old School Essentials Advanced, and what you discover right off the bat is there are 22 classes that players can choose from, which offer an incredible amount of nuance for your character design. And among those are 9 class races, as opposed to the original 3 that existed in Moldvay Cook. So as much as it's a faithful representation, and the mechanics of the game are very much Moldvay Cook, Basic, and Expert, Old School Essentials is its own thing in and of itself. And when you add in the advanced rules that allow you to split off both race and class, the different combinations of characters you can create expand greatly. But you have, as it's always been, certain limitations on how you choose your race. You have to have certain requirements in your ability scores in order to select that race. And then when you select it, you are limited again in the types of classes that you can play. This is to help balance out gameplay. But keeping with the optional context of these advanced rules, Old School Essentials has also added rules in, which are optional, that allow players to disregard the limitations on what races and classes you can play, and even helps bulk up humans a little bit so that people might still want to play them even in a wide open game. This is really good. And probably one of the most impressive things about the Advanced Player's Tome and the Advanced Referee's Tome is how inside their pages they have everything you need to play either flavor of the game, whether it be their classic version with race as class or their advanced version where they are split. All the rules are there in these books, and they don't confuse one another, they don't contradict one another, and they don't break each other. That is quite an accomplishment. So because Old School Essentials has created something that is beautiful, is constructed well, and organized impeccably, as well as adding in different features to the game which don't break its heartbeat, which is Moldvay, Cook, Basic, and Expert, Old School Essentials, or OSE, is something really worth taking a look at. I think next week I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to open up my first edition Gamma World book and roll up a character for everybody to see. That should be some fun. Until then, happy playing, everyone.